Here we are recording again, and we're working today on lesson 8, vector drawing techniques in Photoshop CC 2019, Classroom in a Book. This is a chapter on working with vector images. So in this lesson, we're going to learn how you tell the difference between bitmap and vector graphics. We're going to start to learn how to draw some straight and curved paths using the pen tool. We're going to save our paths. We're going to draw and shape, edit shape layers. We're going to draw some custom shapes. We're going to use a smart object that we import over from Adobe Illustrator. And we're going to use some smart guides to help us align things. Now, vector graphics are something that we have not been working with yet, except for a little tiny bit. There was a mention of them last week in the typography lesson. So there's two categories of computer graphics. There are bitmap images, which are like photographs, and there are vector graphics. We can use Photoshop to work with either type, and we can even combine those two types in one Photoshop file. So I'm sure you've noticed that bitmap images, like the ones we've been working with, are based on a grid of dots called pixels. And when we're working with bitmap images, we edit groups of pixels. And we work with bitmaps because they're able to represent really subtle gradations of shade and color. So they work really well for photographs or some kind of artwork that you might create in one of the painting programs, like using the brush tool, where you have a wide range of values between a light and a dark. But the disadvantage is that they contain a fixed number of pixels. So if you zoom in or you scale it up or you print it at a low resolution, they can look jagged. You can get jaggedy edges and things don't look crisp. Now, vector graphics are made up of lines and curves that are defined by mathematical objects called vectors. And these graphics keep their crispness, whether they're moved or resized or you change the colors. And this is what artists use to create logos and other graphics where you might be scaling them really small or really large, and you want the edges to stay crisp, and you're not so worried about a lot of gradation. So solid colors or kind of quick color changes, that kind of thing. There can be some gradation in a vector image, but it's not going to be as fine as it would be in a bitmap. So the outline of a vector shape is called a path, and a path can be curved or straight, and we use a certain set of tools to work with vectors. And so we use what we call the pen tool over here in the tools panel. We have the pen tool, the freeform pen tool, curvature, and then we have some anchor point tools, and then we have shape tools. So down here we have the rectangle tool, rounded rectangle, ellipse, polygon, and the custom shape tool. So those are kind of some of the tools that we were working with in this lesson. And the pen tool is probably the one you use the most, but the other ones can come in handy for sure. Paths can be open or they can be closed. And so you can have and we worked with an open path when we did the type on a path last week. So it was just a wavy line that had a start and an end. A closed path, like a circle, is continuous. And so the type of path that you draw affects how you can adjust it and select it. So in this lesson, we're going to draw a path around a coffee cup, and we're going to create another path inside the handle, and then we'll subtract one from the other so that we end up with this little logo up here with the lightning bolt, and we don't have we have just air inside the handle. And anyway, I'm going to show you how to do that. So here's what we're creating. It's a sign for a fictitious coffee shop. I'll go ahead and open the start. Actually, I want to open the practice, because before we even start with our actual image file, we're going to practice a little bit with the pen tool. So this is called 08 Practice. And we'll, as usual, I'll save it as a working file. And I'll save it where I save all my working files, which is on my desktop. I'm going to zoom in here so you can see this a little bit better. The pen tool works a little bit differently from our other Photoshop tools, like our other selection tools, because we've selected things based on pixels. But the pen tool creates paths, and paths have anchor points, and they can have anchor points that are smooth, or anchor points that are corner, that make that have right angles, and you can make segments that can be curved or straight. There's a whole section in your book on page 193 about how to a little shortcut on how to create different types of shapes and paths in Photoshop, so you might want to look at that. But to start here on our practice file, we'll select the pen tool. And up at this little menu, I want to make sure that I'm creating a shape. So you can create a path or a shape, or you can do pixels, but I'm going to create a shape. And then I also want to make sure that rubber band is not selected. And let's see if we can see that here. And that's in our path options. So I think it's, yeah. If you click on the little gear icon, just make sure that there's no rubber band. There's no check mark next to the rubber band. We don't want auto add and delete selected. And we don't want any color. So in the pop-up menu for fill, right here, I just want to make sure you have that red line to the white. We are going to put a stroke, and we're going to put a nice green color in there. I'm going to go ahead and pick a bright green so hopefully you can see it. And then I'm going to make it a little bit wider so that it shows up on the screen by putting it at 4 pixels. And then here, I want my stroke to be in the center. Actually, that's not giving me that. More options. Oh, align, I want it to be in the center. So there's menus within menus, so I'll click that OK, and then that was under here under more options. And then you can click anywhere outside, but just know that once you start clicking with the pen tool, you're going to add an anchor point. First thing we'll do is just draw a straight line. And we're going to, I want you to see what's happening, so I'll put Paths tab bring it forward over here in the layers. You'll see there's nothing on it yet because I don't have any paths in here. I'm zoomed in. I'm going to go ahead and just click A and release the mouse button. Now what I've done there is just created an anchor point. And then if I go over here and click B and release the mouse, I've created a straight line with 2 anchor points. And then to stop drawing, you want to press enter or return.
Okay.
And when you see that little icon change, that indicates that I've stopped that particular path. So you guys should see a little green line here from A to B. You know what, I'm going to increase that. There we go. Kind of want to make it nice and chunky so you can see it. Now with a curve, so that was just click, move to another spot and click again. Oh, why does that keep going back? There we go. And yes, we're finished. Now, when you draw a curve, you actually hold, you click and drag. So it's a little bit different because you're going to apply these handles, which you'll see as I do it. So I'll click once on the semicircle, and that creates that anchor point. And then I'm going to click B, but I'm not going to release the mouse yet. I'm going to drag, click and drag. And as I drag towards that little blue circle, you'll see that my line that I'm creating, my path, is starting to curve. Then I can release the mouse button as soon as I get that curve. And you'll see that there's 2 handles here. And I'll show you in a minute what I can do with those. I can use it to adjust my curve. But I'm going to keep going here, and because this is a curved section, I'll click and drag again and get that curved section. And then I can click D, and because I have this handle here, I get that final anchor point, and I get the end of my curved path. So things to remember are when you're drawing like this with the pen tool, try to use as few points as possible to create the shape that you want, because the fewer points you use, the smoother the curves are and the more efficient your file is going to be. So now we're going to create an S-shaped path. And I'll show you a couple tricks in order to change directions. So just like we did before, I'll click A. Oops. And what did I not do? I didn't press enter or return. So I will undo, and then I will enter or return, and that completes that path. So when that little star icon appears next to my pen tool, now when I click over here at A, it's not creating a line from the D on the segment before and the new A. And then I'll do the same thing I did before, which is click and drag to apply that curve. And then I'll go ahead and click to C and drag. Click to D and drag. And you can see that I'm just creating a nice curvy line. So clicking and dragging. And this just takes a little bit of practice. And then when I click here, what do I need to do? It completes my curve, and I need to hit enter or return, and I have my curved line. And you'll see that as I'm doing this, each shape that I've created has its own layer on the layers panel. But there's only one path in the paths panel, because every time I start working on a new work path, it overwrites the work path for the one previous. Now that you hopefully have the idea, we'll do a little bit more of a complex shape. And then we'll tackle the coffee cup. So I'll go ahead and start as always. So remember, with straight lines, you just click, move to the next area, and click again. Because C is a straight line, I can click and release my mouse on C. And then I can click and all the way over to E. But when I click to F, because I want a curve here, I'm going to click and drag, and then my curve appears. Then I will click and drag on G to make that curve of the handle. Now, I don't have to click and drag here at H to complete that curve, but in order to go straight from H to A, I have to convert this anchor point from a smooth point to a corner point. And it's very easy. You use your Alt and Option key. So Alt if you're on a Mac, or sorry, Alt if you're on Windows, Option if you're on a Mac. And I'm just gonna click here to create a corner point, and then when I click A to complete it, it's a straight line. So that's our practice file. You might want to do that more than once. And now we're just going to go ahead and move on to our actual start file. And we'll work on that in a similar way. So you can trace a shape from a photo. And this is really great if you want to make certain types of shapes. You almost use it like it's a template. So we're going to draw a path around the outside of the cup and then another one on the inside of the handle. And in this file, there are 3 layers. We have a background layer and we have 2 templates. So these are here to guide us in drawing these first shapes so that you can get the hang of it. As usual, I want to save this file. And you can see why it is useful to save these files, because you may want to go back and try it again. And then with the pen tool selected, I'm going to click point A. We'll start here. And Photoshop creates a new layer for the shape. And then select B. Now this is a curved line, so I won't just click. I will click and drag to create that initial curve. And then I will click and drag to C to go around the top of the coffee mug. And I'm going to continue tracing the cup and clicking each point and dragging it when I need a curve. So I can finish here, and I can actually, I'll go back and show you how to adjust that later. I can click a straight line here. Now we start a curve, so I click and drag. Click and drag. Click. Click and drag for a curve. Click and drag again. Go around the outside of the handle. Just click, and complete my path. Now, if you want to adjust anything, there's another little tool here in our vector tools called the direct selection tool. So there's the path selection tool, which is on top, and that selects the entire path that you just drew. But if you choose the white arrow or direct selection tool, you can click on a point and you can make some adjustments in that in that path by pulling on those little handles. So it allows you to kind of fine tune it a little bit and get that edge of the cup. So I'll go ahead and now that I'm finished, I can press enter or return to deselect the path. And oops, and you know what? I need to go back because I really kind of messed up this little area down here. Somehow I missed H altogether. So let me see if I can just finesse that a little bit to at least include a little bit of H. Maybe I can add, I'm going to add an anchor point there since I skipped over that. And I want to add an anchor point right here. I'll go back to my there we go. You won't do that because you won't miss H. So there we go. So we've drawn a path that outlines the outside of the cup, but we want the inside of the handle to be transparent. So we're going to draw a shape that will isolate the inside of the cup handle. So we can hide this layer and make the inside template visible. And then we want to make sure that shape 1 is selected. And in the paths panel, we want to select shape 1, shape path. Select the pen tool again. And your book says subtract front shape, but that's not what you want to do. You want to exclude overlapping shapes. This is really important, and I'll put it in an announcement. But in this little menu right here, we want to exclude overlapping shapes. So if you're watching, make a note of that. And all those options determine how multiple shapes will interact with each other in a path. So after we draw the cup outline, we'll exclude the inside of the handle. So we'll go ahead and start again with A. We just click and drag to B, click and drag to C, click and drag to D, click and drag to E, and then because this is a straight line here, we have to convert this particular point. So I'll use Alt or Option to convert that, and then click A, and that just adds a straight line from E to A. Now we're going to save this path. So in the Paths channel, you can see our cup outline, and we're just going to double click it so that we can change the name, and we'll just call it Cup Outline. Let me say OK, and then deselect all of the paths just by clicking over here in the empty area. We don't need outside cup over in the layers panel. We don't need these templates anymore, so we can just go ahead and delete them. So outside cup, we can delete. Shape 1, we can delete because we've saved the path, and the inside handle we can delete. So all those. Now let's save our work, and so look over here and you still have your path. And we'll save that, make sure we don't lose it after all that work. So now we're going to work a little bit with some custom shapes. You can create your own custom shapes. Photoshop comes with a lot of different custom shapes. So we'll take this path that we created and we'll save it as a custom shape that we can use for our logo. So over in the Paths panel, we want to select the cup outline path, and then we'll go up to our edit menu and we want to define custom shape. We're going to rename this shape coffee cup and say OK. In the tools panel, hidden under the rectangle tool, is one called the custom shape tool. And if you select that, up in the option bar, you've got a custom shape picker. Oops. Right here. And this is really important for you to know for later. You're going to see, it might not exactly like mine, but you're going to see a variety of shapes that are preloaded into Photoshop. You can purchase additional shapes off the internet. You can make your own and save them. You see that our coffee cup has been saved here at the end. But one thing I want to show you before we leave here is that if you're not seeing all of the shapes that you want, there is a menu over here with lots of other shapes, symbols, talk bubbles, frames, arrows, nature, etc. And you can choose one of these, and you can either replace the current shapes with all the arrow shapes, or you can append, which means add the arrow shapes to the current shapes. And that way you'll have more options. But for right now, I'm just going to choose the shape that I made, which is the coffee cup shape. And I want to go back over here to my document, and I actually want to put this back on screen. Go back to my custom shape tool. The coffee cup is selected right now. And now I'm just going to draw that shape. And I'm just going to start up with the upper left document. I want to hold down the Shift key so that I maintain the original proportions and start dragging until this is about 2 inches tall. Right about there. And then as you can see over in the layers panel, that added a new shape to my file. And I'm going to go ahead and name that coffee cup. So we created a custom shape, and we used the custom shape tool to draw the shape on the image. But right now it's just an outline, so we need to add a fill. So with the coffee cup layer selected, we'll again choose the pen tool. And up here in the option bar, we want to choose black for our fill color. And we don't need that green stroke anymore, so we'll just add no color. And now the coffee cup is solid black. And if you do that with the pen tool, just undo if you add an anchor point somewhere where you don't want it. And then we can enter or return to deselect that whole coffee cup path. We want to add some interest to this coffee cup, so we're going to subtract a lightning bolt shape from it, allowing the background to show through. So again, we'll select our custom shape tool in the tools panel. And in the paths panel, we want to select our coffee cup shape path. And then in the option bar, you want to subtract the front shape from that same little menu that we excluded, we used when we wanted to take out the inside of the handle. So we're going to subtract the front shape. And now your pointer appears as crosshairs with a little minus sign. We're going to select the lightning bolt from this menu of custom shapes. And so just look around and find the lightning bolt. And if you don't see it, you might have to add more of your shapes. But some of these come loaded with Photoshop, and I think you'll have the lightning bolt already. When we select it, we can see it is selected. And we'll go ahead then and position that into the upper left of the coffee cup. And then we'll just drag it down to the bottom right. And when we do that, that path that shape is subtracted from the coffee mug. Now we can enter or return to deselect that, and now we have a little shape cut out from our mug. So we've done quite a lot so far. If you're a designer, you may work with someone, an illustrator who works with Adobe Illustrator or some other illustration program. And they may send you files that are smart objects. So smart objects are layers that you edit in Photoshop non-destructively. So any changes that you make remain editable and they don't affect the actual image pixels. So regardless of how often you scale or rotate or otherwise transform a smart object, it's going to keep its sharp, precise edges. You can import vector objects from Adobe Illustrator as a smart object. And if you later edit the original in Illustrator, the changes will be reflected in the placed smart object in your Photoshop image file. This is really priceless for someone who works a lot with in the design world, those changes to be automatically updated in any file that you've used that smart object in. So when you place a file, you can link it or you can embed it. If you link it, Photoshop will remember the folder path to the placed file so that you can do that updating. You can just go back to the original file and it'll update in the Photoshop file. If you embed a smart object, Photoshop will include the entire object in the current Photoshop file without storing the path to the original file. So just two different ways you can do it. So we're going to work with a logo type that was created in Illustrator. We're going to import that as a smart object. Select the Move tool and select the coffee cup layer. And you notice I'm going back and forth from paths to channels, but you'll get used to that. And make sure coffee cup is selected. And then we want to go up to our file menu and we want to place linked. You see that placed embedded is right above it. Place linked. Now I will navigate to where I have my lesson files. And I want to choose the logo type EPS file. And then instead of OK, my option here is place. And the Kailua Coffee logo type is added to the very middle of the composition. And it's inside a bounding box with some adjustable handles. And you'll also notice that a new layer appeared. It's the logo type layer. Now we're going to drag this whole object to the upper left corner of the sign, just to the right of the coffee cup. And if you want to move your coffee cup anywhere, you can. But we will just start here. And then we're going to drag a corner to make it larger. And we kind of want to fill the top portion of the image. So you can finesse this any way you like. I'm just going to do it quickly like this to place it. Of course, you might want to center it a little better if you were doing this for work, and you can do that with the Move tool. Anytime you click away from that layer, you're going to confirm the transformation. So now your logo type layer is resized. And now you'll notice that this is, you can probably barely see it, but it is now a smart object, and it is linked. There's a little chain, a little link object down there, and it indicates that it is linked to the original object. All right, we're looking pretty good here. We created the shape with a black fill. Now we'll just do a few changes, make it a little snazzier, and we'll add some effects. We'll go back and make the logo type layer selected. With the logo type layer selected, we're going to go to the FX menu, and we want to choose add a color overlay. So here we go. And in that dialog box that pops up, just choose a dark red or burgundy color. So kind of go over here. And then you can say okay to that. We want to choose bevel and emboss. And if you just click to select it, that gives you a bevel and emboss. But if you click the actual words bevel and emboss, then you get the options over here for bevel and emboss. But just go ahead and select the defaults and say okay. And now the color, the effects, the bevel and emboss and the color overlay are affecting the logo type layer, but we want them to we want it to look the same over here on the coffee cup. So we'll just go ahead and copy them over. Press Alt if you're on Windows, or Option if you are on the Mac, and drag the effects over to the coffee cup. And you'll see that the same effects now are applied to the coffee cup. Now we'll clean up the Paths panel by deleting the cup outline because we don't need it anymore. So we can select this and delete it. So we're all finished with it. And then save our work. And our image is complete. And so is the chapter. So I will stop recording and see if you have anything to add or any questions.